والآن نبدأ عرض تقديمي بعنوان Retaining and Developing Talents in Changing World of Work. تقدمه Miss Antoinette Oglethorpe, multi-award winning specialist in career management and mentoring. Miss Antoinette, the floor is yours.
Can you turn it on? Is it on? It's on. Okay, thank you. $81,396 hours. That is the amount of time the average person spends working in their lifetime. That is too long to be unhappy. Yet 60% of people are emotionally detached at work. 19% are miserable. So it's probably no wonder that some people are thinking about a change. In the Middle East and North Africa, 26% of people are thinking of making a move in the next 12 months. In sub-Saharan Africa, that number increases to 40%. Now, there are lots of reasons why people might want to change their organization and their job. Better work-life balance, different culture, different tasks. But research shows that lack of career opportunities is the primary driver of attrition. It's actually above compensation. It's above people management. So we've talked about people's relationship with their manager. Well, that is important, but not as important as career opportunities or perceived career opportunities. Now, what does this mean for HR? It means capability shortages and a massive recruitment challenge. It means that organizations won't have the ability to innovate, grow, and execute their organization's strategy. But what if you could avoid that challenge? What if the organization championed career development? What if managers talked to employees about their careers and their aspirations and supported them to achieve them? What if employees took ownership for their career development? That's what I'm here to talk about. I want to share with you how a focus on career management can change things. Because the reality is that dissatisfied employees will quit physically and leave, or quit psychologically and stay. And we have seen both of those phenomena recently. We saw the Great Resignation. We've seen quiet quitting. So that's one of the big challenges that HR professionals need to deal with. And focusing on career management can help you retain your employees, lessen your recruitment challenge, and enhance your employee experience. Let's start with talking about the changing world of work. And let me ask you, what does career progression mean to you? I'd like you to imagine a picture, some kind of image that represents career progression for you. I asked that question in a webinar recently, and I got these replies. Firstly, stairs to climb. Secondly, a linear, incremental graph. Thirdly, a ladder. And finally, a climbing tree. Really? In the 21st century, is our view of career development really so traditional? Do we really progress by climbing steadily upwards? If so, that is a real surprise to me, because jobs and careers have gone through a number of shifts if you go back far enough. In the 19th century, most people worked in agriculture. The Industrial Revolution brought urbanization and created factories. Most people worked on assembly lines. After World War II, corporations were born. The industrial assembly line inclined into the corporate ladder, and the word career first entered our common language. And in those days, typically, you joined a company for life. You spent 30 or 40 years climbing that corporate ladder by getting promoted periodically, and you ended wherever you ended up on the ladder with a gold watch and a pension. Life is not like that anymore. The world of work is still changing. There's no such thing as a job for life these days. It is very different. And we're going to talk about some of the shifts that we need to be aware of as we look at the way the world of work is changing. There's 5 of them. We are going to talk so much about technology today. The first one I'm not going to talk that much about, apart from to say that exponential advances in technology are massively changing our world of work. We've talked about artificial intelligence, big data, robotics, automation. All of those are changing the nature of jobs around us. 45% of jobs are likely to be automated and therefore not exist in the future. And all of these technological advances are there to reduce complex tasks and reduce labor. But at the same time, they increase uncertainty and anxiety for those people whose jobs are going to be affected. What we need to be aware of, and what we need to help employees realize, is that actually these changes bring advantages. Those losses create opportunities. We have seen through successive human revolutions, agricultural, industrial, digital, that advances in technology create jobs and opportunities, as long as we are flexible and adaptable enough to respond to those changes. The second shift we need to be aware of is changing demographics. People are living longer, they're keeping fit for longer. That means that we now have 4, sometimes 5 generations working together side by side, all with their different values, different expectations, and different needs of the workplace. The third shift was the global pandemic. It changed the way we worked in a matter of months. It massively accelerated changes that were happening already in terms of remote and virtual working. And it seems that now we're recovering from the pandemic, hybrid working is here to stay. And research shows that that actually improves productivity and it increases happiness and satisfaction in the workplace. But it is not without its challenges. Now, managers and employees need to balance that flexibility and autonomy with accountability. Employees themselves need to balance their personal productivity with work-life balance. Globalization is also changing the way we work. Cross-border collaboration, distributed workforces, increases in the multiple cultures that exist across the organization, and therefore the importance of inclusivity, diversity, equity that we are all familiar with. And finally, there's a business shift. 1 million new businesses are created every year. And that is shifting business from corporations to a more entrepreneur-driven society. We now have the gig economy, where people are taking their working lives into their own hands, choosing who they work for, how often they work, how long they work. We probably all know graduates who are setting up businesses from their bedrooms even before they've finished university. And that means that people are expecting more freedom and more autonomy in terms of their work style and workplace. So we need to recognize that all these changes are going to happen and are going to change the world of work around us. Employees can't necessarily future-proof their job. So if some of those changes are going to impact on whether that job is needed in the organization, then that is going to be a response to the market that the organizations will take. But employees can future-proof their careers once they realize that actually it's about their approach and their acknowledgement of what's going on and being adaptable and flexible enough to respond to the changes they see around them and getting the support they need from managers and organizations. Because that adaptability and flexibility will be the difference between being left behind and actually seeing these changes as an opportunity for development and growth. And all of that means we need to talk about career development differently. The challenge that many managers and organizations face is that employees are looking for the career equivalent of a sat-nav. They're looking for career paths with pre-programmed routes and destinations. And that kind of approach to career development is really only possible in static organizations where you can map out those destinations and those pre-programmed routes. Now, is it a surprise that employees are looking for this in this world of work? Well, maybe not, because in education there are clear milestones. Every student at some point in their education has specific tests to pass. And if they pass those tests, they metaphorically get promoted to the year above them. So at the end of school, there's an important exam to pass. They pass that, they get certain grades or certificates. If they go on to university, the same happens. Pass exams go up a year. Pass exams at the end of the experience, you get letters after your name, you get a degree, you get a huge ceremony and acknowledgement of your achievement. If you go into one of the professions like law, medicine, accountancy, it's similar. You continue to take exams, get letters after your name, get certain job titles that show your achievements to the world. But in many organizations, that is no longer the way careers progress. Those corporations that got developed and created that career ladder, well, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, all of those started downsizing and restructuring and reshaping, and the ladder started to break as leadership positions disappeared. So if ladders still exist, they're harder to see and tougher to climb. That doesn't mean to say that growth and development opportunities don't exist. They do, but they're different and varied, and they're constantly changing as organizations change and new jobs evolve and change and disappear. So career development is now a lot more like orienteering. Individual employees need to think about where they're trying to get to and what the possible options and routes are to get there. They need to navigate the terrain around them. They need to look at the map in front of them, and they need to continually adjust their course as they make progress. The Oxford English Dictionary defines career as a person's course or progress through life. In fact, the word career comes from the Latin carus, which means chariot. And that means that actually, if we think about our careers as a range of experiences, big or small, that come together, they form our career journey. And when we encourage employees to think about their career development as a journey rather than a ladder, it helps shift their thinking. It helps them celebrate freedom and autonomy. We're told that the younger generations don't want to be pigeonholed. They don't want to be stereotyped and put into boxes. So this allows them that freedom and autonomy to not follow a pre-programmed route that somebody else has designed for them. They can take ownership and control of their own destiny. They can focus on becoming more flexible so that they can adapt and respond to those changes as they progress through their career. They can also recognize that this is not new. Unless they've been working for more than 30 years, then they have always been working in an organization and an environment that was changing. If nothing else, pretty much everybody, or certainly the majority, have been through the last 3 years and have adapted and flexed the way they worked in response to the pandemic. And they can identify the strategies that have helped them make progress until now. So when we're looking at empowering employees, as we mentioned earlier, we're looking to help them identify that they have skills, they have resources, they have knowledge that will help them make the progress they want to make. Helping them identify the strategies they've already adopted that have helped them progress until now, helps them recognize the resources they already have and gives them some of that power. For all of these reasons, I encourage you to stop defining career development in traditional ways. Stop defining it just as jobs and job titles. Stop defining it in terms of grades and grade progression. Stop defining it as promotions. Instead, I encourage you to focus on enjoyability and employability. Enjoyability is the satisfaction that a person gets from their working life. We've talked about well-being, we've talked about the importance of purpose, we've talked about the importance of a person's manager and the people they work with. We've talked about the importance of challenge. So this isn't to say that it's just about having an easy life. It's about recognize what's important to that person in terms of their working life and therefore gives them joy. Employability is their knowledge, skills, and capabilities. All of those things that make them valuable in their current role, to their current employer, but also in preparation for future roles and for future organizations and employers. There is no manager that can give a person a promotion unless they are the owner of a business. They have not got the single autonomy and authority to do that. But what they can do is help people develop their readiness for a new role, whether that be at an equivalent level or a higher level or even a lower level. Actually preparing them, enabling their readiness, supporting them in that development so that when that opportunity becomes available, they're the person that's ready to step into it and it isn't a massive leap of faith by both the individual and the organization to move them into a new role. So whose responsibility is career development? Let me talk you through a three-way partnership. But before I do that, let me ask you about your experience and to start thinking about you as an employee. Because the three-way partnership starts with employees. And that's about them being empowered to take ownership of their career development. Not something they can do on their own, but only you know what success looks like for you. Only you know kind of what you've enjoyed about your career so far. Only you know what you love about your current job or what frustrates you about your current job. Now, to do something with that information in your organization, you need to be supported by managers and mentors who need to engage you in finding out those things, actually finding out what success looks like for you. Do you want to take on greater responsibility? Do you want to manage more people? Do you want to go to lots of meetings and attend senior events? Or do you actually want something that will balance more with caring for your elderly parents or allows you to indulge in a hobby outside of work? The organization needs to enable these things to happen. So there's a three-way partnership that all have to work together in order to support career development in organizations. So how has your career path unfolded? Has it been predictable, where there was a pre-programmed route and you could say right now or 20 years ago, yes, you would end up exactly where you are right now? Or has it been unpredictable? So if it's predictable, perhaps you could raise your hand. Okay, there are a few hovering. What about unpredictable? A few more hands. Some people are either undecided or just have very low hands. So I started my career developing washing powders for a living. There's no way that I could have realized I would be standing where I am today. And that's the case for a lot of people. It's wildly unpredictable. Or some people might say, well, I took some responsibility, I responded to those opportunities that were given to me, or I helped create those opportunities, or it was completely an accident. Well, you know what? No one's career is completely an accident, because we all make decisions for ourselves. You applied for those jobs, you accepted those job offers. So ultimately, we start with the employee. Career development starts with the employee in terms of what they're looking for. Developing some insight and self-awareness into what their experience of their career has been like to date and what that tells them about what's important to them in their work, what their values are when it comes to work, what their strengths and skills are, what tasks they enjoy and want to spend their time doing. All of that then helps them think about what success might look like for them. And of course, none of us have a crystal ball. But we can still think about, I would love it if my role involved more of this. Or I would love to work with that person. Or I would love to help achieve this purpose. I have a confession when we start talking about the role of managers. I have been passionate about career development for most of my career. But when putting it into practice with my employees, I have sometimes got it wrong. And the story that comes to mind is one of my best employees, Julie, when I was an HR director for a tech company in the City of London. And one morning, I arrived in at work, 8:30 in the morning. I was usually the first in, so I was a bit surprised to see her already in the office. And when I went into my office, she followed me in and closed the door behind her. Well, when you manage people, you know that an employee wanting to see you first thing in the morning is rarely good news. And sure enough, she said, "I'm sorry, Antoinette, I have to give you my resignation. I'm going back to Australia." Well, I was stunned. I was shocked, and frankly, I was a bit hurt. She had recently got married. She was from Australia, but she'd recently got married to a British guy. She was happy in her work, or so I thought, and she was settled in the UK, or so I assumed. And that was the issue. I assumed I knew what she was looking for from her career, but clearly I had never had a conversation with her about it. And for whatever reason, she felt unable to raise it with me. Now, as it turned out, we were a global company. We were able to transfer her to the Sydney office. 10 years later, she was the HR director for the whole of Asia Pacific, and she had 2 beautiful daughters. She'd actually divorced the British guy, but we'll not worry about that. It could have been so much easier, though, if we'd just had that career conversation. And I'd been able to build that into my plans. Because although, as an organization, we kept one of our best employees, obviously, it caused me some challenges in terms of my own team. So the greatest support that managers can be is to talk to their employees about their careers. Now, that is not without skill. It takes a certain amount of attitude. It takes a selflessness by the manager, because they need to recognize that this is about more than just them. It's about that individual and the organization. But those career conversations are fundamental if you're going to be able to dovetail the needs of the employee with the needs of the organization. And that's ultimately the key. This isn't about meeting employees' career development needs at the expense of the organization. It's finding ways to dovetail their needs with the needs of the organization. And that means managers being more creative about how they resource the work they need doing, so that they resource it in a way that meets the needs of the employees in their team. Finally, organizations, and typically HR, need to facilitate and enable these things to happen. And that means having a career management strategy. And there are 5 things that you need to think about in your career management strategy. The first one, at its heart, is a clear definition of the organization's values in relation to people and career development. Now, in my experience, this is not generally the biggest gap, not in terms of articulated values anyway. Most company websites have some really wonderful promises about their values related to people development and what employees will get in terms of developing their career when they join the organization. The real question is whether those promises are borne out and whether those values are lived in terms of behaviors and decision-making on a day-to-day basis, rather than just being aspirational. Secondly, you need sponsorship and support from senior leaders. We call them executive career champions. They're executive talking about the importance of career development, both in terms of employees taking ownership, but also in terms of managers and leaders having those conversations. And some of the best ways they can do that is telling their own career stories. Very few senior leaders have climbed a ladder one rung at a time in a really predictable way. They have all sorts of wonderful stories about the creative twists and turns that their careers have taken and the strategies that they adopted in order to respond to them. So get them to share their career stories and get them to champion and role model career development in your organization. As I say, managers and others need to be trained to have quality career conversations. These are challenging conversations. We wouldn't expect anyone to have a performance conversation without some form of training. Career conversations are the same. Employees need to have the opportunity to talk about their careers with someone. Managers, mentors, coaches, HR, internal, external, preferably internal. But managers need training to do that. And employees need training to prepare for those conversations, because those are big conversations. And in spite of all that amount of time we spend at work, the average person spends more time planning their annual 2-week vacation than they do thinking about their career. So employees need help through workshops, training, and support to actually think about their career, reflect on their experience to date, and think about what that means in terms of what success looks like for them. And finally, as I mentioned on the panel, we need processes that enable and support these things. So actually looking through our HR process and thinking, does that reinforce what we're trying to achieve here? Are there things that get in the way or actually hinder what we're trying to achieve, or give controversial messages, give conflicting messages about what we're trying to achieve? So I call it being a trustworthy organization, because it's about having processes that are congruent with your intentions and your desired outcomes. So I'm going to encourage you to reflect on those 5 things and think about your organization. Which of those 5 things is strongest? Which of them might need the greatest improvement? And if you'd like some help in carrying out that assessment, I invite you to take our career management culture health check. 25 questions, takes less than 10 minutes to complete, will give you a personalized report on your areas of strength and your areas for improvement. So if you're trying to put together a business case, if you're trying to craft your HR strategy or your career management strategy, this will give you some really useful data and resources. So you can simply scan the QR code or go to that website, and it will take you straight to the Career Management Culture Health Check so that you can complete that data and get your report. I'm not sure we've got any time for questions. If we have, great. I'm going to look at the organizers. But if you have anything that you'd like to talk about or ask, we're going into a break after this, so please just find me at the break, and I'd be delighted to talk through any specific questions you might have or specific situation you're dealing with in your organization, rather than the more general information and context. So I think that's all from me, apart from to say, shukran. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Antoinette.